And we're live. Hello and welcome to episode 20 in this series on pre-launch publication and getting your podcast ready to go. I'm John Moore and I'm joined as usual by my co-host, Mr. Rich Bowden. You there, Rich?
I am indeed. Episode 20. My word. Hello, listeners. Hello, viewers. Nice to be on.
Okay. So today we're going to be talking about my favourite post-production tool, Auphonic. Rich mentioned it a couple of episodes back, and so we're going to run through some screenshots and show you how it works. If we end up with a picture showing images to infinity, I've hit the wrong button. But hang in there, we'll see how we go. So,
all right, looking forward to it.
Okay, so Auphonic is basically a post-production tool I use for setting levels, setting volume, and removing noise and hum, and above all, converting the WAV file or whatever other form of high-definition audio file you have into an MP3 so that it's then acceptable for publication on a podcast host. MP3 is the standard for podcasting. It means a smaller file size, and as such, it's also of a lower quality, but it's good enough to work in earphones and on the Alexas and the Google Pods and all those sorts of things, as well as through the radio in the car, apparently. I haven't listened to podcasts on Alexa or the other one, the Google or the Apple HomePod or any of those. I have listened to podcasts through the radio in the car, and really it loses that intimacy. It just becomes radio then, and I found my mind was wandering. So I prefer to stick to the headphones. But that's just a personal thing. You any thoughts on that, Rich?
Yeah, I tend to use similar ones to these, and when I'm walking around, I like to have podcasts in my ear. Yeah, I can see what you mean about radio becoming radio. That's a separate thing altogether, and podcasting is a lot more intimate. Yeah, totally agree.
Okay, well, we'll give a crack at this, and we'll go to the home page for Auphonic Productions. Bear with me, people. Application window, click, and share. Ta-da! There
yes.
You go. And I've now got the mouse over here on this one. Okay, so this is what the Auphonics homepage looks like after you've signed in.
Mm-hmm.
Up here, logged in, and I'm about to put a new audio file through the system. So I hit new production, and it then pops up to this page. I actually have a preset here, but we'll come back to that in a minute. So we'll just go with the standard. So to begin with, you choose your file that you want to upload. I'm not sure if that's showing or not, but because it's popped up over the top. Okay, So I'm picking this one in WAV form. Double click on that and it's loaded it here. Now, of all the things that go on in Auphonic, there's only two sections that matter for podcasters. Remember, this is also developed for music makers. So it's the output file, and you get lots of choices there. I always tick MP3. The bit rate, I always do at 64 kilobits per second. Now, we covered this in production standards a few episodes back. It's the lowest standard with a high enough listenability to produce a small enough file for people to download that are in corrupted areas. So people west of the ranges in Australia, people in the west of Ireland, basically, unless you happen to be in a town. It means it's the quickest possible level they can download at and have an acceptable listening experience. And again, MP3, that's the only choice I get there. And I always do it in mono because that keeps the bit rate down low enough, keeps the file size small, and I only ever listen with one earphone anyway. And if I have to listen to a stereo show with one earphone, I lose half the show. So they're the choices I make there. MP3, 64 kilobits per second, and MP3 again. Now down the bottom here, these are all automatically ticked as part of the system, so I don't touch those. And then I add noise and hum reduction. That gets rid of things like lip smacks, not real good on in-breaths, or people hammering bits of metal outside the front door. but it does reduce the lip smacks and a lot of other things that you need to remove to improve the listening quality. Now, loudness target here, -16, that's the EU standard for volume. And volume, as we did with Luff's a couple of episodes back, is loudness units from the standard or something. Now, the EU suggested -16. It's not a law or anything, but Alexa and Spotify, and particularly Spotify, from my way of thinking, requires -14. So I always hit -14. It's that little bit louder, but not so you'd notice really, but it's important for their production systems. And I notice that I'm getting quite a lot of downloads now on Spotify, particularly for World Organic News. So I'm happy to go with what they want because it's a whole other segment of the market, for want of a better phrase. New bunch of listeners, people that would never have heard me anyway, that now get to. So we'll do it in a way that keeps them happy. It doesn't alter the listening experience through the podcast apps a whole lot. So they're the two areas I check. Okay, so MP3, 64 kilobits per second, mono, noise and hum reduction, and -14. And that's all you do. You hit start production, and you can see that you get 2 hours of free service each month. I've got an hour and 19 minutes left, so I'm not going to run this one through because I've already done it. And I'll show you what happens afterwards. So once you hit start production, a little red line pops up and it uploads your file. Then you get audio processing, audio encoding, and then you get this picture. This is a picture of it. So none of the tabs are going to work on it, but it shows you what it is. So there's the title again with an MP3 at the bottom. It's an audio file, MP3, 64 kilobits per second. That particular track goes for 7 minutes, 24 seconds, and it's a 3.4 meg size file. And then I hit download. That downloads it to my download folder, funnily enough. And from that, I can upload it to my host, which in my case is Libsyn. Does that sort of cover most of it, do you think, Rich?
It does. Just looking at that, if you stay on that screen, John, where your mouse is, and you can actually click on that. I know you can't do it with that. That's just a screenshot, but the show input is something that I always like to look into.
Yeah, it shows you the difference.
So you can see the difference between your input file and the level ones the more level ones that Auphonic comes up with. You can also click on stats, and once you sort of get your head around it, usually what I do when I submit a file, it's usually about 21, 22 loudness. Now it'll bring it all up to 16, so -16. So it all levels it up and brings that is lower to the right level. It's actually quite fascinating to look at that, to see the changes that it has made. It's called a blunt instrument by some documentary makers that I know, but it's a very efficient one, I think.
And the thing is, because it's an algorithm, it improves every time people use it. And there are quite a few users around the world, probably millions by now. So every time someone puts a file through, it's learning. And it gets better. So, and
the great thing, of course, is that if you keep within that 2 hours, then it's free. So you've got all this at your disposal for no cost at all.
Yeah, that's about 4 half-hour shows a month, say one a week.
Yep.
And it's not overly expensive, I don't think, from what I remember, let me see if we can go here, pricing. So you get your 2 hours for free. And then for 9 hours, it's €9, or 11 US. So about $15 Australian for 4 hours. So it's not overly expensive if you needed to go for more stuff. Once you get over, 100 hours a month rather, you're probably doing other things anyway. And so that's that number then, which is about 100 Australian, ceases to be an issue. But if you've got more than 100 hours, give them a ring. They also do you can also do a one-time credit purchase somewhere. But
you can download onto your desktop, can't you, John?
There's a desktop app which I think is $89 or €89 or something.
And that's a one-off?
That's a one-off, and then you've got it for good.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I assume it updates and whatnot. It's on the wish list, but while I'm getting it for free, I'll use it for free, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
John, there was just one point that I thought might be handy for introductory podcasters, and that is why the input file was WAV and the output file is MP3.
Because I'll just close this down now and come back to the joys of my face. Ta-da! Here we go. Yeah. There we go. We record at the highest possible level, and there was an interview with the fellow who developed Auphonic, and he said it works better when you've got the highest possible quality coming in, because that way it knows how can I put it? It knows what it is you want to have in there and what you don't. And it's easier with a higher quality because there's more information in the file.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've probably hashed all that up and butchered it, but the general rule of thumb is you put as much information into your file as you can. So the highest bit rate in WAV, I think in Apple it's also .ai.ff is another file type. All those things are available. .wav, W-A-V, or WAV, W-A-V-E, excuse me, is fairly standard across the industry, and people know what you're talking about. So you record at the highest possible standard and then publish in MP3. And you also edit in WAV. When I first started, I was converting the GarageBand output file to MP3 and then running it through, and then I heard this bloke interviewed. And there was some difference between putting a WAV file in and putting an MP3 in.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you don't get a choice. Well, you've got an MP3 file to work with, so that's what you work with. And Auphonic will deal with it. But you, as a general rule of thumb, record in the highest possible level, edit in the highest possible level, and then send it through Auphonic at that high level and take it out as an MP3. It's a really handy tool, and I'd recommend it for everyone. I've spoken to some people who say, I only use it when the sound quality's a bit iffy. I use it for every file. That way there's a consistency across my output, and you can tell when something has and hasn't been through it. If I just send it out of GarageBand in MP3 and listen to that, and then listen to the waveform that's come out of Auphonic as an MP3, there is a difference. And it's a different quality. So I did test all that stuff, and that will be almost 2 years ago now. Maybe even longer. It was one of the first tools I stumbled across in Google searching, because there used to be a thing, well, it still is, I believe, called Levelator, but I think Google bought that and then stopped doing research work on it or something. So it still levels up your sound levels, but it doesn't do anywhere near the job that Auphonic does. And I don't think there's a noise and hum reduction either. So go with Auphonic. I get no, what's the word I'm after? I get no financial benefit or any other benefit for that matter from them. I just highly recommend it because it works. A bit like this Google Hangouts tool. I think that's a wonderful thing too. Yeah. And yourself, Rich, you've used Auphonic?
Yeah, you use it all the time now, John, on your advice, and yes, it works really well. I'd just like to make the point added to what you were saying. Most of my podcasting is done with a co-host or an interview with a guest, and there are always problems with leveling. You may, when you interview a guest, the levels might be, say, up here, for you, and the guest has a soft voice, or the microphone's further away, and so the waveform kind of looks okay up here, but drops away down here. Now, what Auphonic will do is it'll level up like that beautifully, so that people don't have to turn down the volume on on their headphones and then turn it up again when the person being interviewed it just levels it out nicely. So with 2 people or more people, Auphonic is great for that, to help level out that problem. Just one other thing I was going to say, John. Your point about the 64 bit rate. I did have a problem once. I think I contacted you about it when I'd bin, I think it was a 112 bit rate rather than 64, and I went over the amount that I had allocated to me in the hoster as Libsyn. And so your point was that what was happening was that because I'd increased the bit rate, it meant that the file on Libsyn was hosting was higher. So I just dropped that, and that was fine. And as you say, no, unless you're an absolute professional, you can't tell the difference, and it's perfectly suited for a talk show anyway, for a talk podcast.
Yeah, and we're not producing symphony orchestras here. It's and the thing that sometimes people have trouble with is that Auphonic runs in hours per month, but most hosts run in megs per month. So the idea of the 64 kilobit per second means that I think that was a 3.4. Let me have a look. 3.4 meg file size, down from about, I think it was 160. So it does make a huge difference. And I've hit the wrong button sometimes and tried to upload a waveform to a dot wave to Libsyn, and it takes forever. I'm thinking, what the hell's wrong with this? And then I'll get an error message saying, we can't upload this, you need to do it in MP3. So I just do it again and click the right one. But you'll know if you've hit the wrong one, and because it just takes up too much time and it takes up too much space. Let me see. The original file, let me just have a look, was 117.6 megs. So 117 down to 3.4. So you can see a lot of the concerns radio types have about sound quality are going to get scrunched out anyway when it goes to MP3. And so by using the Auphonic tool, we tidy up the bits that are important and leave the bits that aren't. And away it goes. And I've never had any complaints about sound quality from listeners. And if there is an issue with the sound quality, I'll mention it at the start of the show so people know something's coming. Like there was one of these we did a couple of weeks back where there was some problem and it just didn't record properly and great chunks were missing. So then I just read something in so that there was content for people, and I deleted this particular episode from that particular episode from YouTube. But so when you've done all the work we've been talking about up to this episode, and then you run it through Auphonic and you put it into your host, once you've got your first episode, that's when you can wander off to Apple and get yourself registered there. Make sure you've got a podcasting page with your feed in it on a website somewhere. Libsyn does that for you. That way Google can now index it, and Google is indexing podcasts. So in the same way that when they bought YouTube, suddenly video became a thing, now that Google's actually indexing podcast audio files and feeds rather than just show notes, I suspect we're on the cusp of a huge boost in listenership, because it'll turn up at the top of people's feeds, search results rather, and they go, oh, what's that? Click. Oh, what's that? Click. So we'll see how we go. So everyone,
similar to social media, John, how that always gets elevated in the search engine, doesn't it? And that's become
in theory anyway. So we'll see. But Google themselves have come out and said they're ready to push podcasting now that they've got their systems in place and can crawl and can find the RSS feed. So you need to have one RSS feed per page if you have got more than one show. So you need separate pages for each show. And Google does its thing. And again, it's another algorithm-based tool. So we'll see how we go. But I think we're on the verge of something wonderful. I think that just about covers it for Auphonic. And in fact, that just about covers it for this series. We'll have a wrap-up next Friday, 9:30 in the morning my time, 6:30 in the evening Rich's time. And, excuse me. And then we'll have a bit of a break for a few weeks. If people have got any thoughts or ideas on what they'd like to see in the next series, I've got some ideas lined up already. but we'll go a little bit further beyond the getting ready for your first podcast and getting things out there that we've been covering in this series. And we'll go from there. So if you've got any thoughts, send it to me at podcast@mrjohnmoore.com. I'll put that in the notes down here in YouTube, and I'll add it to the show notes for the podcast. You got any thoughts, Rich?
Just a couple of things, John. Something I haven't tried, but I know that Auphonic does is it can multi-track. In other words, if you have 2 tracks, say, of one conversation, 2 people, it is able to work on that. Apparently, I'd only know because I've read about it, so I've never actually tried it.
And I've never done it either.
Yeah. The other thing is when you say about Apple, not sure if you mentioned that artwork. You need the artwork too, as well as the episode. But this is overall, John, this has been an excellent series, excellent introductory series, and people out there that have got an idea for a podcast or wanted to do it for a long, long time, this gives them the tools, doesn't it, to firstly, harness the inspiration, and then know exactly what it is that they need and what they don't need. It probably is just as valuable. So thank you very much, John, for that. I know that you've got your workshop still happening over at mrjohnmoore.com. That's correct, where you can podcasters can download checklists and sign up for tutorials as well. That's right, John?
Yeah, there's a couple of courses. There's an intro one for, I think it was $15 or something like that, for people who want to learn how to editing GarageBand for podcasters. So we leave out all the music stuff and just do the podcasting bit. And then there's the full course from idea to published podcaster that's there as well. If you have a look on the courses tab at the top of the page, on any page. But if you go to mrjohnmoore.com, your first option there is to fill out the feedback form to get your free checklists. So I would encourage you to come and have a look. And we never spam people. We're here to help. We're not here to annoy. So with that, I'll pull this one to an end, and we'll do an overview next Friday. And that'll be the last one for this series, and we'll go from next month on to the next series, and we'll put out some announcements and whatnot about that beforehand. So thanks for listening, everyone. And
fantastic.
We'll see you in a month.
See you
Friday. See you Friday.
Friday.